This is why you should always sleep with your lights on. In 1991, a man named Christopher Case was found dead in his bathtub, fully clothed in the fetal position. When police interviewed his best friend Sammy, she told them about a very disturbing phone call she got from him the night before he died. On the call, he told her that the previous night he had woken up to what sounded like whispering coming from underneath his bed. When he went to look, he couldn't move. As he laid helplessly, he watched a black figure pull itself out from underneath his bed. Once it was fully upright, it reached down and began choking him until he passed out. The next morning when he came to, he felt his neck and it was swollen and bruised. And then he saw blood on his hands and he saw that there were deep, uniform incisions on each of his fingertips. As he's saying all this to Sammy and telling her how scared he is to go to bed that night, he suddenly stops and he says, "I hear whispering outside my room." Then the phone went dead.
Alright, let's talk about Smile Dog. Smile Dog is apparently a cursed image that has been going around the internet for quite some time now. This dog apparently takes the form of a Siberian husky smiling a little too wide. It's also said if you don't spread this dog's image over the internet after seeing it, you will die. Some people have reported after not sharing the photo, the Siberian husky shapeshifts into their room as this demon dog here. This dog will sadistically torture you until you share the image, and if you don't, he will kill you. Some even say they'll see Smile Dog in the bushes watching them as they're walking home or walking to their car. So, what do you guys think about Smile Dog and his cursed image?
This is why you should always keep pictures of your parents. A little girl named Olivia who lived a very quiet life decided to check her homework assignments that were posted online. The teacher posted that they needed to write down their favorite memory with their family as well as bring a photograph. Olivia then writes about how her and her mom play dolls every night in the basement before bed and that she has a lot of fun doing so. She finishes her paragraph and then looks in her dad's drawer for a photograph of mom. She only found pictures of her mom from high school but decided to use it anyway. Olivia goes to bed and wakes up the next morning. Once she arrives at school, the teacher then says, "Let's start presenting our project." Then the teacher called Olivia's name to present. Olivia then begins to read about how her and her mom play dolls every night and then pulls out the photograph. As soon as Olivia pulled out the photograph, her teacher's face goes numb. She then asks Olivia if she can take a closer look at the photograph. She then recognized her mom as one of her previous students. Then the teacher asks, "Where did you get this photo?" Olivia says, "My dad keeps them in his drawer." The teacher, shocked, sits down Olivia and pulls out an old newspaper. The newspaper headline, "Local high school teen murdered, boyfriend gone missing." The teacher then looks at Olivia and says, "Your mom has been dead for 14 years.
This is why you should never go on a subway again. So what happened is that one night, a teenage girl was taking the subway home from work back to her house in New York. The scary part is when she went on board, she sat directly across from two men with a woman sitting in the middle. The creepy part is that the woman kept staring at her and wouldn't even blink while the two men never once looked at her. Well, at the next stop, a man with a trench coat walked in, but the girl didn't pay much attention to him. The girl kept trying to look away so that one lady wouldn't stare at her, but she just kept looking, wouldn't even blink. Well, at the next stop, that random man with the trench coat pulled out the teenage girl and dragged her out of the subway. She was screaming, asking for help because she had no idea why this guy just pulled her out. But the guy told her to calm down and said he actually saved her life because the woman that was staring at her was actually dead, and the two men next to her were holding her up to make her look alive. The random guy with the trench coat said if he didn't pull her out, she was going to be their next victim.
Hey, I can't be the only one. Who else knows people that have killed other people?
Finally, something that I can actually relate to. So my grandma killed her mom, so she killed my great-grandma. It's kind of a crazy story, but back in the 90s, my grandma was over at her house giving her a bath. She was elderly, so my grandma was kind of in charge of taking care of her. During the bath, my grandma brought up the past about how she was abused as a child by one of her stepdads, and her mom then basically admitted to knowing about the abuse but blamed her for it instead of the stepdad, which sent my grandma into a rage. She ended up drowning my great-grandma, and then after she was dead, instead of calling the police, she cut up her body into 8 different pieces, put them in garbage cans, filled the cans with cement, and then put these garbage cans in different storage units all throughout my hometown where I grew up. When the police were investigating, she lied and said my great-grandma was in Hawaii with this wealthy man she met, and even faked letters from her. It's pretty crazy.
Disturbing internet websites you should avoid. Planecrashinfo.com. This website allows you to read and listen to the last words of airplane pilots and passengers before a fatal accident. Deathdate.info. This website will calculate the time you have left to live on Earth based on the information you provide. Simulation-argument.com. This website tries to convince you that we are living in a simulation, through studies, documents, and scientific reports.
Sylvia! Boo! 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 Piggy! Hi, baby! Hi! Hi!
To some people, The Blair Witch Project was one of the scariest movies ever made, and despite your opinion, whether you think it is or isn't, the way they filmed this movie was absolutely incredible. All the actors in the movie were taught how to use the camera equipment so they could do all the filming themselves. When they were hiring all the actors, improv was a really big indication of if they would make the role or not. The camera crew realized that if they just followed the actors all around, it wouldn't be as scary, and it might ruin the film a little bit, so what they did was they stopped filming them and let the actors film themselves. So what they would do is they would keep GPS's track to the actors and send them into the woods. Then when they found the campsite, which would be marked by like a bicycle flag or something, they would go into the crate below it and they would pull out the director notes, and that basically told them what scene they were going to be filming and what they were going to have to do, and from that point it was just all improv. Things got a lot more interesting for the actors as time went on through the movie. In total it was an 8-day shoot, but some of the things they had to do got very interesting, so follow for part 2.
Remember, your Amazon Alexa is always listening. In 2018, a girl named Alexa came home to her apartment to find her creepy stalker landlord in her kitchen. She screams and threatens to call the cops, and he just smiles and says, "I was just checking in on you," and leaves. Feeling totally sketched out, she spends the next few hours down the hall in her friend's apartment before finally going back to her room to go to bed. That night, she woke up to her Amazon Alexa responding to someone in the room. It said, "I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Did you say I'm watching you?" The girl instantly turns on her lights and looks around, but no one's there. So she unplugs Alexa and is about to go back to sleep when she hears what sounds like a man grunting in her closet. As she's staring at her closet, her Alexa turns back on.
Don't ever touch anything. And if you do, let me know. This is the worst thing in here.
Did you know that was a warning from Lorraine Warren herself? And if you don't know who Lorraine Warren is, ever seen Annabelle or even Conjuring? This is the actor that played her in Conjuring. She passed away in 2019, leaving behind one of the most haunted museums in the world. So many bad things happen to people that just touch the stuff in this museum that she had to get a priest in there to bless it often. And ever since she's passed, the museum has been closed for rezoning. But I just want to know, who's taking care of her?
Creepiest things that have happened to me as a nurse, part 14. This story did not happen to me personally, but I found it on a Reddit forum and I, oh my gosh, have to share this picture with you so you can be just as creeped out as I am. Disclaimer, I don't suggest that you watch this video at night by yourself or while you're working night shift, but according to the algorithm, you're probably gonna be at all three when this video comes to you. In an ICU in Kentucky, there was this patient that was experiencing all sorts of hallucinations. They have a video camera in the ICU, which is pretty common now, and they captured this on camera. Does that not look like some sort of demon on top of the patient? The patient died just 3 hours after the nurse took this picture. What is that?
This is why you should always lock your doors. A class was playing a game of Kahoot when they heard a voice on the intercom say, "This is not a drill, go into lockdown." The students huddled in the back of the classroom and then the power went off. Minutes later, the students heard the sound of a man screaming at the top of his lungs, running down the hallway. The lunatic man started banging on the lockers and his screams gradually got louder. He then started banging on the classroom window, yelling, "Open up." He eventually left, and 10 minutes later, a voice on the intercom said, a mentally ill person had entered the school and attacked the lady at the front desk. The staff did a sweep of the school and still couldn't find him, so they locked the doors and resumed class. Later that night, one of the janitors went into the utility closet when this happened.
This is why you should always FaceTime before bed. A woman named Catherine got off work and decided to get in the shower. She dried off, put her hair in a ponytail, and got ready for her FaceTime date with her husband since he was out of town. She laid in bed, got comfortable, and picked up her phone. She dialed her husband's phone number and it started to ring. Her husband answered the phone and the two talked about how their day went and just kind of caught up with one another. Then the power suddenly goes out. Catherine began to worry, but her husband told her not to panic. Since they purchased an older home, power outages were normal. Then he told her the power would turn back on in about 30 minutes. Catherine said okay and continued her conversation in the dark. She then realized her phone battery was low, so she reached to grab her charger. As she was reaching for the charger, her phone falls. Her husband becomes silent over the phone. She reaches under the bed and picks up her phone and says, "I think you're accidentally on mute." Her husband looks at her and says, "Under the bed." If you guys want to see more stories like this, make sure to like and follow.
Believe it or not, this is a well-documented true story. In 1947, an American ship picked up a horrifying distress signal coming from an unidentified vessel. The first transmission was all officers, including the captain, are dead. The next transmission was the whole crew is dead. The last transmission was I die, and then silence. The Americans trace the signal back to a ship that's drifting off in the middle of the Indian Ocean. They quickly assemble a rescue team who boards the ship. They find the entire crew has perished in the exact same position. They are on their backs with their hands up as if fighting with some unseen force, and they look like this. There was no physical damage to the bodies or to the ship itself. However, even though it was 100 degrees outside, it was 40 degrees on the ship, and the bodies were rapidly decomposing. As soon as they tie up the ship to tow it in, it explodes, and then it sinks. To this day, no one knows what happened inside of that ship. Some say it was a chemical leak, others aren't so sure.
Pictures taken right before death. First, we have this 18-year-old girl who wanted to get the most extreme selfie, so she climbed up a bridge which was about 30 feet high. And then she fell off, but it wasn't the fall that killed her. It was on her way down, she grabbed some electrical wires and they electrocuted her. This picture was actually taken by a guy who was just testing out the new camera that he got, and it shows this 14-year-old boy literally flying out of a plane. It turns out he was hidden in the plane wheels, and during takeoff he somehow fell out and it was caught on camera. This looks like your typical best friend picture before a night out, right? Except the night would end in disaster, with one of them using the belt she was wearing to strangle the other, and she then blamed it on being intoxicated and said she couldn't remember anything of the night anyways.